Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Week 3 recap of football action in the American Athletic Conference. There were 12 games on Saturday. Two teams were on bye weeks, Army and Navy. Next week, Army will host conference foe Rice, a game which I predicted Rice would win, while Navy hosts the red-hot Memphis Tigers. I predicted that Navy would pull the upset, and so I will stand by that. But Memphis does look very tough indeed. Speaking of Memphis, quarterback Seth Hennigan threw for 272 yards and two touchdowns, the 40th straight game he's thrown a TD pass. And the Tigers used a stifling defense to force three turnovers in a 20-12 victory over Florida State. Memphis only yielded 37 rushing yards against the Seminoles team that I never would have guessed would start out the season 0-3. I incorrectly called for FSU to win this one, and although they had their chances, kudos to Memphis for staying strong and moving to 3-0 on the season, the only team in the AAC to hit that mark this far. In Charlotte, true freshman quarterback Trexler Ivy made his first collegiate start, and the Baltimore native went 16 of 23 for 194 yards. Hassan Wilson scored on a 39-yard touchdown run and broke a tie against a game Gardner-Webb team, putting the 49ers up 27-20 midway through the fourth quarter. Gardner-Webb frantically came back and scored a touchdown to cut the margin to 27-26, then failed to convert on a two-point try and ended up losing by just one. It was Charlotte's first victory of the year and one I predicted, but I never thought it would be that close. Appalachian State's Joey Aguilar passed for a career-high 424 yards and two touchdowns as the Mountaineers went across the state to take down East Carolina by a score of 21-19. In the game, I correctly predicted Appalachian spotted ECU the first 16 points of the game, then holding them to only 3 points over the last three quarters. ECU is now 2-1 on the season. Florida Atlantic picked up its first win of the season over Florida International by a score of 38-14. FIU took a 7-0 first quarter lead, but then the Owls put up 38 straight points on the strength of three Zuberi Mobley touchdown runs, one a 72-yarder, and quarterback Cam Fancher had a TD run as well. FAU's defense came up with four turnovers and took control of the game in the second quarter and never looked back. The University of South Florida found itself down 14-0 on the road at Southern Mississippi, but then came storming back with four straight touchdowns, then adding three more in the second half to ease their way to a 49-24 victory. The Bulls bounced back from last week's tough loss to go to 2-1 on the season, rolling up 562 yards of offense, with 369 of that on the ground. Byron Brown threw for 193 yards and two touchdowns, and running back Kelly Joyner rushed for 117 yards on 10 carries and scoring two touchdowns, while fellow running back Naquan Wright put up 105 yards on 15 carries and added a touchdown. UAB traveled to Arkansas and fell 37-27 after rushing out to a 17-3 lead early in the second quarter. Jared Zeno threw for three touchdowns for the Blazers, who now drop to 1-2 on the season. UTSA had the misfortune of having to travel to Austin to face the number 2 Texas Longhorns. I did not think that they would be able to keep it close, and they were not. The final score was Texas 56, the UTSA Roadrunners 7. UTSA is now 1-2. Tulsa went up against Oklahoma State in Tulsa. The Cowboys jumped out to a 35-0 lead and cruised to a 45-10 win. The Golden Hurricanes are also 1-2 now on the season. Staying in the state of Oklahoma, Norman was the site for the game between the Sooners and visiting Tulane. Oklahoma shook off a bit of a sluggish start, and the Green Wave tried to make a game of it, going into halftime trailing 21-6, before finally succumbing to a stronger Sooner team by the final score of 34-19. Tulane falls to 1-2. Temple played host to Coastal Carolina, and although the Owls led in total yards 314 to 287, Coastal Carolina gained 184 yards and controlled the line of scrimmage. Coastal came away with a wire-to-wire lead and eventual victory by a score of 28-20. Temple is still seeking its first win as they see their season record drop to 0-3. North Texas has an improved team this year. They ran into a buzzsaw in Lubbock, Texas against Texas Tech. The Red Raiders rolled up 586 yards in total offense, crushing the Mean Green by a score of 66-21. North Texas had pulled them within 10-7 when Wyatt Young took a screen pass 75 yards for a score. Taj Brooks had 109 rushing yards for the Red Raiders after missing the previous week with an injury, starting a 42-0 scoring surge for the home team. North Texas took the loss and now goes to 2-1 on the season. Houston downed Rice by a score of 33-7. E.J. Warner only had 50 passing yards against the Cougars and threw one interception. And I want to issue an apology for mispronouncing his name on last week's show. The Cougars thoroughly dominated the contest, outgaining Rice on the ground by a margin of 237-75. Rice's record now drops to 1-2. It was a tough week for teams in the AAC. 12 were in action and only 5 were able to come away with victories. Memphis, Florida Atlantic, South Florida, and Charlotte. Check that. That's only 4 teams that were able to come away with victories. Of the 12 games in week 3, I correctly predicted all of them except for the Memphis game. So I went 11-1. That brings my season record to 35-3. Let's take a look at the week 4 schedule. Army, still undefeated and coming off a bye week, will take on the Rice Owls. Army looked good in its first 2 weeks, and Rice only looked good in week 2. But I think that E.J. Warner will bounce back and lead his team to a big win as Rice takes the victory. Indiana will entertain Charlotte and will pin another loss on the visiting 49ers. ECU travels to Lynchburg, Virginia, where they will fall to the Liberty Flames. Florida Atlantic, fresh off its first win of the season, will travel to Connecticut, where they will lose. North Texas will travel to Wyoming. Now, during the summer, I predicted that Wyoming would win. I will stay true to that and stick with the Cowboys, although I will not be at all surprised if I turn out to be wrong and the Mean Green find a way to get it done. Having said all that, I'm still going with Wyoming in this one. Temple is hosting Utah State, and they simply have to get the win in this game this week. I think that Temple will get its first win of the season. Tulsa will travel to Louisiana Tech. In this matchup, you have 2 vastly improved teams. I think the Golden Hurricanes will be able to shake off the effects of a bad loss against Oklahoma State and pull out the victory. UTSA will recover from last week's beatdown against Texas to defeat Houston Christian, and that will move its record back to 500 at 2-2. USF draws another tough opponent this week as they host the University of Miami, Florida. Boasting one of the better teams in the nation this year, the Hurricanes will pick up the win, and South Florida will even its record at 2-2. Tulane travels to in-state Louisiana, and I think the Cajuns will cook up something special and take down the Green Wave, who will suddenly find themselves with a 1-3 record and scrambling to stay afloat this season. UAB is on a bye this week as they prepare for Navy in week 5. And speaking of Navy, the 2-0 midshipmen will be hosting the 3-0 Memphis Tigers in the AAC marquee matchup of the week. Memphis comes in as the 3-0 team in the conference, while Navy comes in as the home team, having had an additional week to rest and prepare. Last week, Memphis held tough against Florida State and came away with the win. And although they looked good, I did see some chinks in the armor. I called for a Navy win back in the summer, and I'm sticking with that now. So what are your thoughts? Drop me a comment, share your thoughts, and be sure to tune in next week as we start getting into more head-to-head conference play. We'll break down week 4 and look ahead to week 5, right here in the American Athletic Conference.